Good evening and welcome to And What Next? Demanding Change, this special roundtable event celebrating disabled filmmaking and disability joy while confronting the film industry's barriers and ableism. My name is Lillian Crawford. I'm a white woman in her 20s with dark curly hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a flowery blouse and a brown velvet jacket. Professionally, I am a freelance film and culture writer as well as co-host of the Autism Through Cinema podcast. I work with cinemas including the BFI, the Garden Cinema, and the Barbican to curate relaxed screenings for neurodivergent and disabled audiences in order to make cinema spaces more accessible and comfortable for those who do not feel welcome in typical screenings. I recently hosted an event at the Barbican called Stims Towards a Neurodiverse Cinema, which featured several short films by neurodivergent filmmakers, screened in a relaxed environment, and concluded with a panel discussing with some of those filmmakers how accessible the film industry is for neurodivergent people and what change is needed. I was delighted to be invited to host this panel for Cinema of Ideas to continue this vital conversation in the broader context of disability and to discuss the changing nature of disability both on and off the screen. One of the relaxed screenings I recently curated was for a film I love, the feature documentary Is There Anybody Out There by Ella Glendining. The film is now streaming on Netflix and on demand and was nominated in the Outstanding Debut by a British Writer, Director or Producer category at the 2024 BAFTAs. I'm delighted that Ella is with us this evening to discuss working on her feature debut, as well as the future as she prepares her historical drama feature for the BFI called Curiosities of Fools. It gives me great pleasure to also introduce three filmmakers who worked on the three short films screened online prior to this discussion. Justin Edgar, who wrote and produced Verisimilitude, has directed numerous documentaries and television projects, as well as features Large, Special People, and the upcoming Something Else. He has sat on the BAFTA debut jury, the Disability Screen Advisory Group for the BFI, and advises Channel 4, the BBC, and Netflix on disability. He is also currently writing a book on disability in British film for Bloomsbury. Ted Evans is the writer-director of Retreat, which is currently being developed into a feature. His other projects have included two films for the 2012 Paralympic opening ceremony, short films The End and To Know Him, as well as music videos, BBC One documentary Signs for Change, featuring Rose Ayling-Ellis, and Netflix short documentary Turn Up the Bass. Jessi Gutch co-directed Pyramid of Disunion with Ella Glendining. Her short films have screened at international festivals such as London Film Festival, BFI Flair, British Shorts Berlin, and Edinburgh, including the prize-winning Until the Tide Creeps In and Blind as a Beat. Jessi is currently in post-production on her debut documentary feature Bordertown and in development on her debut narrative feature My Cells Are Trying to Kill Me. Welcome to all four of you. Together you bring a diverse wealth of experience and expertise and represent the future of cinema. I've given a very brief description of each of your careers, but I'd like to start by inviting you all to say hello to our audience and describe yourselves, and to talk a bit about what your disabled identity means to you and how it informs your filmmaking practice. So, if we want to start with Ella introducing herself to the audience, please.
Hello, my name's Ella Glendining. I am a white woman in her early 30s. I've got a round face, blue eyes. I'm wearing a black and white cardigan, and I'm holding a brown and white chihuahua. And I've forgotten what you want me to say.
Well, I thought we might actually, how about we all introduce ourselves and then I'll come back to the question that I asked. I asked rather a lot in one go. No, that's quite all right. Ted, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ted. This is my sign name, Ted, which is two hands kind of embracing yourself. It means teddy bear. I'm a white middle-aged man with a goatee, wearing a black t-shirt, and I'm a deaf man as well. So I communicate both in British Sign Language and I also speak. This is my voice.
Justin?
Hello, I'm Justin. I am a white middle-aged man, sort of slightly greying beard, hair back, pulled back, brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, and wearing a denim shirt. And I'm in my study with some books and plants behind me. Yeah, that's me.
And Jessi.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessi. I am a white woman in my early 30s. I'm wearing a kind of patchwork cardigan with a dark blue wall behind me, and actually some dried flowers from my wedding, which have stayed dry. And I was going to say alive, but I guess that's the point of dry flowers. So I'm going to shut up about dry flowers. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, all of you. So to come to the first sort of big question, I suppose, in why we're all here and what we're going to be talking about, I think it would be important to just talk about a bit about what disabled identity means to you, the word disabled, and how you've used that to inspire your filmmaking. Starting with Ella. Or just go in the order that we have established for the sake of ease.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I have different answers to it. I mean, I'm very disabled and proud. I've always been disabled and proud, really, for as long as I can remember. I think my work will always center disabled people, whether or not the stories that I tell will always be over, well, they won't always be overtly about disability, but I will always include disabled characters. There'll always be disabled led, and to me that's because that's what's most interesting. I love art that's personal. My work is always really personal. My documentary is a personal film, but fiction work that I've done as well is always very personal. Yeah, I mean, I believe so passionately that we are a beautiful, beautiful community worth celebrating, and yeah, I guess it means a lot to me. It does, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it's particularly interesting with your feature film how that comes across, and you talking about it in a long durational form is really important for the discussion that we'll have as well. Ted?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yes, of course. Sorry. So it was a question about what disabled identity means to you and how it informs your filmmaking.
It's a tricky one. Well, obviously, I'm proud to be deaf, but because of my upbringing, I went to a school which kind of tried to make you feel not deaf. You know, we weren't allowed to sign at school, so it's quite common for deaf people to grow up with a mixed identity crisis. And funny enough, that is infused in a lot of my work, you know, trying to explore that identity in the films that I write. And traditionally in the deaf community, I mean, we're changing a lot as a community. In the past, kind of deaf and disabled has been separated. But I think a lot of deaf people now are embracing that. There's a lot more intersectionality within our community now. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I am a disabled man, but it's been a complicated journey, and I kind of still think of myself as deaf because I grew up in the deaf community, and so it's a cultural identity for me, and also a linguistic one. We have a language which is such a big part of my work.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I don't think I really identified as disabled until kind of the mid-90s, until I was in my 20s. I should say that I'm hard of hearing, so I'm completely deaf in my right ear, and I hear about 60% in my left ear. And is a congenital deafness. So I had it from birth, and it was just my normality. And growing up in Thatcher's 1980s, you know, they didn't have hearing tests the way my kids have hearing tests when you're born, you know. So it was just something I kind of felt like I got on with. But then when I heard about, you know, the disability rights movement when I was a student at university, and began to become engaged in those debates and theories, then I very much did realize, you know, that I had a disability, and was really interested in exploring that in terms of my work, but also in terms of activism, etc. And became very proud of it. I think the key moment for me actually is when I went to my GP and they said, "Oh, you can get a disabled rail card." I was like, "Really? Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I'll have one of those." So it was still a very proud disabled rail card holder now.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I wanted to ask this question, and the sort of ideas of disambiguation within disability, is how I mean, I mentioned in the introduction about my work with neurodivergence, and how neurodivergence sort of is categorized under disability as well. So I think that it's very important for us. I'm glad that we're starting with these kinds of conversations, because I think it's very important to sort of look at what that diversity looks like, and what that relationship has to the word disabled, which comes is obviously in the title of this event. Jessi, would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, of course. So I guess, well, like following on from what you just said about sort of diversity of experience, I guess, so I was completely sort of non-disabled until I was 26, and then got a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, and then got a sort of secondary diagnosis of incurable ovarian cancer. And that then obviously, you know, is a big kind of life changer. And I don't think I necessarily thought of myself as disabled, or I suppose it was more perhaps around being ill as a sort of, I don't know, I guess identity perhaps. But I think what I then grew to feel is it very much in a sort of political kind of way, I suppose. And I think thanks to, you know, kind of meeting and making friends with people like Ella and Kyla Harris, Jamie Hale, I think they all really taught me about almost like the radical possibilities of being disabled, and seeing it as a kind of seeing ableism within a context of the fucked up system that we all kind of have to operate in. And I think that was kind of the start of a bit of a journey for me, where it felt more like I could kind of retain, I don't know, like somehow more like not just being like the ill girl who may or may not be dying of cancer, but it was like, no, I'm a disabled woman. And it felt sort of like, yes, this is, it just felt good, I think. So yeah, I guess I'm still a bit new in my identity of it. So maybe I'm still figuring it out a bit, but definitely proudly identify as it now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose in terms of what the second part of what I was talking about, in terms of how that relates to filmmaking, had you been making films prior to your diagnosis, and your relationship with the diagnosis and with disability, and did that change afterwards?
Yeah, so I had, but I suppose I was working within like the humanitarian kind of like charity space. And I hadn't really had my sort of industry, you know, kind of, you know, that like first film where it's like, you know, whether it's like the BFI back it or some kind of industry commission, and it gets that sort of recognition in a kind of industry sort of way. And then basically when I found out it was incurable, that was in the strictest lockdown we had in 2020. And I was basically contending with this idea of like, what if I have to say goodbye to people in lockdown? And then this commission came up with The Uncertain Kingdom, which Justin Short was also part of, where they wanted to do a film that was a unique perspective on the pandemic. And I was sort of sitting there looking out my window when I saw it, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is, and we then got it. And then that short was kind of my entry point, I guess. And it was, you know, it was BAFTA nominated. We didn't actually enter it into any festivals. We just released it online on YouTube. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it was a funny sort of, that was what sort of gave me the break, as it were. And that was obviously inherently tied to that experience. But it wasn't I wasn't thinking of it like that at all. It was literally, I was just thinking, I have to leave one film that's mine and not sort of, you know, in the world, if that's to be. So yeah, that was kind of, I don't know if that did answer your question, but
No, it did. Thank you so much. And I also just wanted to say, before we continue, that if any of you want to come in and respond to anything that anyone has said at any time, do just. I know it's more difficult in this format online than it is perhaps in person, but you can wave or just come in at any point. We don't have to go around individually, but thank you, Jessi, and thank you to all of you, and thank you again to everyone who is listening to this. It's also quite strange that we can't see you, of course. So I suppose with that in mind, I mean, one of the things that I was hoping we'd be able to talk about is how, for potentially people who are disabled and thinking of moving into the film industry, if you could talk a bit about how you thought about it prior to entering it, and what the beginnings of moving towards making films looks like and felt for each of you. Ella, if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you. I think I kind of always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I didn't go straight to uni, and I think part of that was, like, I didn't go and study film at art school or whatever after going to school and college. I think there was probably a bit of not so much internalized ableism, but just fear about, you know, I'm very aware of how the world sees me, and I'm very aware, I've always been very politically disabled and very aware of how hard things are for us. So anyhow, I didn't study film until I was, yeah, in my early 20s. And that was wonderful. And I made a short film, a random acts film, I think immediately after graduating, or I hadn't even graduated yet. So I was like sort of immediately making shorts. But then I thought, well, you know, it's not like you know, I was scared to take the next step into trying to make a feature. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and get in the industry in the way that everyone does, and try, you know, start out from the bottom and work my way up. So I did some sort of apprenticeships and stuff in production. And that's when I realized how horrendously ableist and inaccessible the industry is. It was really demoralizing. I mean, just, yeah, for me, mainly, it was just like the physical inaccess. You know, on a film set, a sea of trailers, the set's like an obstacle course with wires everywhere, and I'm a wheelchair user. So yeah, it was really, yeah, really demoralizing. And I can't remember exactly when the turning point was, but yeah, I continued making shorts. So I was still directing a bit. And then, yeah, the bit of production work that I did was enough to show me, like, you're never going to be able to work your way up, which is, yeah, depressing. So anyhoozle, I had the idea for my documentary. I applied for funding from the BFI Doc Society and was successful. And so that's all wonderful. So I'm doing it. I do think the industry's changing, though. I really do. There's, yeah, access coordinator is a newish role. There are more conversations around disability now, way more than there were even like 5 years ago. Less than that, yeah. So it's not all miserable, but yes, that's my story. Essentially, I realized I couldn't work my way up, and I had to just make stuff now and find a way to make stuff now.
Yeah, absolutely. Ted, what was that experience like for you?
So yeah, I mean, I was always interested in making films as a kid. I mean, I used to experience the cinema in the 90s and late 80s, when there was no subtitles screenings, there was no captions back then. So it was always a kind of visual and musical experience for me. And it really rubbed off on me. I used to film my toys as a kid, a bit like the Spielberg movie that came out last year. But honestly, I never ever contemplated being a filmmaker. It just wasn't possible. And I live in East London, and in a very filmic area. So there's a place called Columbia Road where we have a family business there for many years, and I used to watch the film crews arrive. You know, they do all kinds of TV commercials, and one of my favorite films was filmed in the era Children of Men. So Alfonso Cuarón was here. And just looking at that from the outside, you know, an army of people, and looking at the director and feeling, they're never going to give someone like me a chance. So I didn't even go to university. You know, after I left college, I was exhausted, and I was just looking to find a career for ages. And it wasn't until I saw deaf filmmakers working in television, and I thought, oh my God, well, they're making films, and it was the deaf community who gave me my first opportunity. So my very close friend said to me, "What are you doing in this course? Come and be a runner." And I just quit my the degree I was doing in my 20s and just started from the bottom. And from there, it just kind of progressed. I learned everything on the job, and here I am.
Thank you. Yeah. Justin, how was it for you when you were starting with film?
I mean, my first film was not a disability film, you know, and I got an incredibly lucky break. Really, I hooked up with a producer called Alex Osborne. He'd just done a film for Film 4, and Film 4 had just set up a new department called Film 4 Lab, which was run by your dad, actually, Jessi. Weirdly, no nepotism. And Jessi's dad, back this is in the late 90s, was good enough to green light my first film, you know, and I was really lucky. But I made the film, and I think by everybody's admission, including Jessi's dad, it wasn't a very good film. And it did okay commercially, you know, but it gave me a really useful lesson, which was that if you have the opportunity to make a film, you know, make a film that's important and that resonates and is about something, you know, which my first film wasn't. So that in the wake of that, I sort of combined the two enthusiasms, really, or the two interests of disability and cinema, and realized that nobody else was kind of thinking about disability cinema in a serious way, you know, anywhere in the world, really. You know, nobody was kind of coming in with you know, the politics of disablement theories that were coming through, like the social model of disability. This was the early noughties, and applying those to cinema, you know. And what you did have in cinema was a lot of cripping up and a lot of ableism and a lot of tragedy narratives about disability. And we really wanted to change that. So one of the first things we did when we set up 104 Films was to badger the UK Film Council, as was then the sort of forerunner of the BFI, to set up a short film scheme, especially for disabled filmmakers. So that's what was called the Magic Hour, and we ran that for a good few years, and made all sorts of films. And the one caveat with the first 5 films that we made is that they must all be comedies. You know, we wanted to get away completely from that tragedy narrative, and the idea was always as well that we were, you know, the films had disabled authorship. You know, that they were coming from an authentic voice. They weren't a non-disabled person making a film about disabled people. And I think that philosophy seemed somewhat revolutionary at the time, but certainly isn't now. You know, and that's really exciting that you get so many filmmakers coming through now, and really interesting talents that have amazing, incredible stories to tell, but are also really engaged with the politics of disablement, and are putting that onto the screen in a way that hasn't been done before. So I'm really excited. I think it's a really exciting time. There's some really cool stuff happening for the first time in years, and I'm very, very, very happy to be seeing that.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that there's a way of framing that I'd like us to continue discussing in a minute, but I just wanted to give Jessi a chance first to talk a bit about her experience. Thank you.
So yeah, I guess so I'll be quick because I guess I slightly touched on mine, but I guess as Justin obviously alluded to, well, not alluded to, but so my parents both worked in the film industry, so I guess that was I was always around films, so I just wanted to do what they did. And my dad, who not only has obviously very good taste, also has quite high morals, so he was not keen on the kind of nepo baby idea, so did not help me get a job in the film industry. So I went and did, I don't know, I just had like a load of like really crap kind of jobs, and I don't know, I just was like getting nowhere, and I just hated all of these film jobs that I had, and they were with horrible, toxic people. And then that's when I decided to try and move into like the sort of non-profit charity world, because I just sort of had enough with it, really. And I think I probably would have just carried on. I was very happy kind of doing that. And I'd sort of just been trained to be like a sort of emergency delegate kind of person, which basically means that if there's an earthquake or something, you get a call and you fly out in like 48 hours. So I sort of was just about gonna start doing that, and then that's when all of the cancer stuff happened. And then I guess, yeah, since then, the film I mentioned, that was kind of my sort of route in. And yeah, I don't know, I guess it's a very bizarre, like, sort of, I just have a very bizarre existence, because I can only really live sort of scan to scan, which it doesn't necessarily always like coalesce with an idea of, your career and future and this sort of thing. So yeah, it's quite an odd experience, I would say, but yeah, I now don't really know any other way.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what I was thinking about while you were all talking was the sort of pressure that there is for disabled filmmakers to make films which are about disabled people, or that might be described as having a sort of disabled aesthetic. I mean, especially if it's the sort of the idea that one can tell when a non-disabled filmmaker is making a film about disabled people, and vice versa. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about your relationship with that pressure, and how important I mean, Ella, you said earlier that you want to make films because, of course, that there's a lack of representation, and that's obviously very important. But I do wonder how you feel about the pressure that you're placed under to actually make those films.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there are definitely, well, yeah, I think there's two different camps with this topic. Like you said, I do want to make films about disabled people. I don't feel under pressure to, but that's because I'm doing it, I guess. I will say that I was very strategic in making my documentary. I like documentaries, but I love fiction way more. I love writing way more. But yeah, as I touched on earlier, I realized that, yeah, as a wheelchair user in this industry, I'm not going to be able to work my way up in any like really in any universe in this universe. So So I'm so sorry. I don't actually know what's going on with my brain tonight. Can I just be really candid about something?
Yeah, of course.
I've quit drinking, and I used to like have a little drink before I did anything like this. And like I found it so much easier. It's absolutely fine and it's great, but I feel like I'm just like really not on form, but I'm gonna try and right.
Not at all.
Everything will
Do
be
not
fine.
worry.
I just wanted to get it out there because I'm like, what the hell are you saying, Ella? Right.
If
I
it's
want
reassuring, you were making complete sense. So do not
okay, I
worry.
don't know. I started to lose it. Can you repeat the question very quickly and I'll give a really excellent and concise answer.
So you were talking about the pressures that that you are under, or
Ah,
disabled filmmakers are under, to make films about disability.
yeah, I reckon some people probably do feel pressure, yeah. And I was saying that I was strategic about making my documentary because I knew that I had this disabled story to tell. I love my documentary, of course, but I do want to move away from making films where disability is like the hook and the reason that the film
Right.
exists. So when I said earlier that I'm always going to make films for disabled people, about disabled people, sorry if I'm talking too fast, that's absolutely true. But what I'm really excited about for my future career is just telling incredible stories that happen to center disabled characters. That was a better answer.
Yeah, and I this is something that I think about a lot in relation, and also in relation to neurodivergent filmmaking as well, and all other forms of identity within filmmaking, is the idea that in order to get sort of started, you have to make that kind of film in order to then develop your passion projects, I suppose. So it's a sort of way of doing that. Ted, do you have thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a deaf director. That's how I'm written. That's how people refer to me. Sorry, and I kind of have to live with that. So every kind of project that comes to me, there's some part of my shared experience attached to it. So I do kind of feel that kind of weight of expectation that I have to kind of either facilitate a kind of crossover, or I have to kind of reveal some part of my own or my community's shared experience. And I kind of feel split about it because on the one hand, I absolutely love my community, I love my people, and I'm excited about the stories that kind of come to me. But then it's also like, well, am I allowed to make any other film? Part of the wonderful thing about filmmaking is the discovery of a story, and to be able to tell other people's stories, a wonderful privilege that the majority of the industry, both in TV and film, do every day, but as of yet, I think in my entire 15-year career so far, I've been offered 2 corporate films that had no kind of relation to one part of my identity. So that's how, or that kind of just affects me as a person, because kind of like, well, what am I allowed to do? Where do I belong? Kind of thing. I get asked a lot to do consultancy work. Probably can't talk too much about that, but like often I'm used to help other people tell our stories, or to tell stories that feature the deaf experience. And I don't mind it. I really do like it, but I do question my kind of long-term place. And the only thing I was just saying, to anyone who's watching, who's also come from a minority group, be a writer. If you can write your own stories, you have control. And if I wasn't a writer, I would feel pretty fucking desperate, to be honest. I think writing is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Justin, do you want to?
Yeah, no, well said,
Yeah.
Ted. I think that's it, isn't it? Because then if you can write, you can really control your own depiction and representation. So that's a really, really key skill. I always think that writing is like a muscle. You know, if you do a bit of it every day, it will get better. You'll get better at it. So people say, "Oh, I'm not a writer," you know, but and there are real stories out there. You can tell. You know, there are some really, really cool stories about disabled people. You can tell. You know, so use that as a starting point, and then just practice and work a little bit every day on that. And there aren't enough disabled writers, you know, out there. It's getting better, really, in the BBC writers' room. You know, Channel 4 have done some really good work around that and bringing on new disabled writers. I mean, in answer to the question, I think you've got to do both, really, to avoid being pigeonholed. And I suppose, I don't know, is that sort of easier for me to say, play devil's advocate because I have a non-visible disability, you know? But I don't know. I think there is a bit more acceptance of that these days. I think if there's some kind of scheme or program for disabled writers, yeah, or directors, it's sometimes quite easy to fall into the ghetto, you know, of being a disabled filmmaker. But I think if you're a good writer and a good filmmaker, your work cuts through anyway, really, doesn't it? You know, and you certainly use your status as a disabled person to springboard, you know, into getting work commissioned and made. I mean, a snapshot of my work at the moment, you know, as a writer director, I think it's probably about half and half. You know, so, so some of the work doesn't feature disability at all, you know, and it's just other stuff that interests me thematically. And I don't know if disability is a theme, you know, and you know, I know what my themes and what interests me are, and sometimes they touch on disability and sometimes not, you know. But is disability a theme or a subject? I don't know. Maybe that's another conversation to have altogether, you know. Certainly in the eyes of commissioning editors, etc., it's probably a theme, you know, and that's what they want when they commission disabled filmmakers. And it is a problem, you know, but hopefully we're breaking away from that a little bit. It was something we always tried to discourage, you know, when we were doing magic hour films. You know, films could be about anything, but there are unique and amazing things about the disabled experience, you know, and mainstream culture survives and thrives on the fringes. And you do need to hear these stories as well about disability, and that's important. And it's important to have a sense of identity and representation as a disabled person, you know. So cuts both ways, really.
Definitely. Thank you, Justin. Jessi.
Yeah, I think echoing what everyone's said, like I recently, so my feature documentary has, as it's kind of gone on, it's sort of become actually quite authored in the sense that my voice is in it and it's sort of a very subjective film. I also shot it, so it's very much like through my eyes. But it's been very confronting thinking about writing it, basically, which I'm now like in the process of doing slightly retrospectively, having shot it, because it has nothing to do with cancer or disability at all. And it really made me realize like how much I'd sort of almost that the answer to that question of like, what's your voice? Because I think sometimes people kind of ask that, you know, like, what's your voice as a filmmaker? And it made me realize how much I'd sort of made my voice not just that, but I'd leaned into it a lot and then found myself floundering a bit about like, but what am I writing as me when it's not that? So it's been a really interesting process that I'm still sort of working out, but it really made me realize that. And actually, like what Ted said really struck a chord about it being one part of your identity. And I think in this kind of age of, you know, like diversity box ticking, I think sometimes you end up sort of feeling a bit like you're sort of a tick box and that you need to somehow play into that. Whereas actually that it shouldn't be what it's about at all. It should be about just being able to be who you want to be in many multifaceted ways. But yeah, then saying that my fiction feature is very much a response to the depiction of cancer in films and how it's really bad and really not accurate and just awful. So that was I guess maybe like slightly akin to Ella's documentary where it was almost like a angered response and was very much driven by the disability. So yeah, I guess just echoing what everyone's saying, really, the duality of them, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That was really wonderful. I just wanted to say at this point, I think we've got about 20 minutes left, that if anyone watching wants to contribute in any way or and ask us some questions that I can then read out to our panel, then please do send those through. I suppose one of the things that I was thinking about as well in relation to, as I said at the beginning, that a lot of my own work is in how we actually sort of screen the films and how to reach disabled audiences and who they're actually being made for, because of course most cinema spaces are not completely accessible to disabled people, and certainly not to disabled filmmakers as well. And I think that I wanted to hear a bit about your experiences of how you feel about sort of film exhibition, the different modes of sort of premieres, festivals, Q&As, those sorts of things, and how you navigate the actual part of, once you've made a film, what it's like sort of talking about it and what's expected of you as filmmakers and your relationship to that experience. Ella, would you like to, especially sort of as you've just had a big release, and as I say, I was working on a screening of Is There Anybody Out There, which was designed to be more accessible for neurodivergent people. I wondered how you had sort of found the experience of the film's release.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a real mixed bag. It's been a really, really wild time. Yeah, I guess, well, I don't guess, the last year I've spent traveling the world, going to festivals and stuff with the film. And it's been amazing, but I mean, you know, incredibly exhausting. And I think most disabled people will agree that when you travel, it's like one of those kind of, yeah, microscope moments when you're like, yeah, plane travel, whatever. It's like you see the worst of people. You see people's ableism like so fucking intensely when you travel. Like for me, it's always so much faff around getting my wheelchair in the plane and whatever. So that's been like the most challenging part of the release for me, has been all the traveling, even though I've also loved it and it's been such a privilege. Yeah, I could answer your question with many different things there. Yeah. What else? Talking about the film, it's been good. It's been good for my anxiety. I've become better at public speaking and, yes, less anxious about that sort of thing. Yeah, anxiety for me is way more of a disability than my physical disability. It's like, yeah, it can be really debilitating.
Yeah, I suppose that was partly what I was getting at, was that I wonder, because of course being a filmmaker is you can make the film, but then there's this additional pressure that you then have to sort of release that film and bring it to people and do talks and those kinds of events, which to me just doesn't, for a lot of disabled people, I think is such a huge barrier to actually then being able to release those films. So that was the sort of aspect that I've been thinking about a lot. So yeah, do you want to say anything else on that, or but
yeah, no, well,
yeah,
on that aspect, it's, yeah, I feel I've just come back from a trip, so it all feels very fresh and raw, because it's literally traumatic and amazing at the same time. Like I really, yeah, it's really brought up so many feelings. And yeah, it's quite an ableist, inaccessible world and system ultimately, but there's been so many amazing things as well, and I'm so thrilled. Like my distributor Conic have been so amazing, and I'm so thrilled that we've done, yes, properly accessible screenings and prioritized that. That's so important to me.
Yeah, thank you. Did any of you want to also talk about this, Ted? Did you?
So I lost you for a minute there. I'm on an iPad. No, I haven't had that much experience. So I'm making a feature this year. So a lot of my screenings and stuff have been short films. But you know, I just to reiterate what Ella was saying about anxiety and stuff, I think how you present yourself and how you present your identity as well on stage is always kind of daunting, because I don't know whether to sign or to speak. You know, I'm conscious about who am I addressing in the audience. You know, you want to represent, you know, you want to be accessible. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't go to festivals that much because they're usually not accessible. You know, just like the subtitles or the speakers. So going to festivals is still kind of new to me, and it's amazing. I love going to them, but it's yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. It's like it's just small things, like, you know, everyone's different, but just like where the interpreter is positioned in a talk, it makes me feel kind of anxious because it looks like I'm not listening to anyone else on the panel. It's just I'm just looking across the scene and all these amazing people are talking, and so yeah, it's a very exposed and visible place. But I think it's getting better. I think everyone's making a much more effort now to make these places accessible. We've got a long way to go, but like Sundance London and Netflix recently, we just launched stuff and they've been really, really supportive. But yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, it does seem to be changing and improving. Justin, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely true that presenting a film, you know, is terrifying, and it's especially if you have mental health issues, you know, and you know, I certainly had anxiety when doing that, and kind of panic attacks and things like that, and loss of thread, etc. You know, during Q&As and talks, and especially, you know, earlier on. But I think much like what Ella said, you kind of get used to it, don't you? You know, after a while. But it was interesting what everybody was saying, actually, because it reminded me not so much about presenting the film, but when I shot my first film, you know, it was a really punishing schedule. We did six-day weeks, really, really hard work. And one morning I just had a huge panic attack, you know, and couldn't go on to set. And I remember somebody saying to me, well, don't tell the completion bond company, because they'll just fire you off the film, you know. That was like 24 years ago. So I'm very glad to say, you know, that in that nearly quarter of a century, things have really changed, and you just wouldn't be allowed to do that now. And I think it's the same, you know, if you demystify mental health a bit more, which we all are doing continually, you know, and things are getting a lot better. Mental health awareness is getting a lot better. Then it makes the notion of, you know, having a panic attack or what have you in the middle of a Q&A kind of a lot more understandable, a lot less scary, you know, because people kind of say, oh, okay, whatever, he's having a panic attack in the middle of this Q&A, that's okay. So again, it comes down to the social model, I guess, doesn't it? The good old social model, you know, and the fact that we're more accepted by society, then it makes our lives just that much easier across the board.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Justin. Jessi, do you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, I was just going to add just a couple of musings. One was just about time, and how time often operates in a different kind of way, I think, when you're disabled, and that can kind of be in lots of different ways for different people, whether it's like in a more day-to-day or like for me, I think what I'm having at the moment, which is quite difficult, is, you know, thinking around when to release my film and what sort of festival circuit to try and kind of, I suppose, get into. And it's, I guess, the lead ups to it and the sort of, you know, for me, it's like I have to think, oh my God, well, if it's 2025, then, but, you know, like, and then you're sort of like, it's just can be very hard to try and explain to people that, like, for them, 2025 might just be 2025. Whereas to me, that's like what if I'm dead? What if I'm on a different treatment and that means that I can't travel and I've missed the whole thing? Or so I think that's something that plays on my mind like a lot, which I think is probably quite hard to understand for some people. And the other thing I was just thinking was about the Forgotten Sea and how we were very, very clear in that it was like, I was like, our audience is people shielding. That is who this is for. So there's just no way that we're going to do anything other than do a big release on YouTube online and do it as an online event. And it was amazing. And it was just the most magical sort of distribution kind of thing, even though it's obviously now I know more, you know, that is almost a bit like mad to just be like, we're just going to put it on YouTube. That's what we're going to do, and then ruin any kind of premiere status. But I often think about it and think how I need to try and remember that and not get sucked up into the industry kind of thing. And I feel like often you get asked these questions about audience, like, do you want an industry audience? Do you want to win awards? Do you want to go to the, or do you want, you know, like the community and impact? And it's like, well, I want both. But like sometimes those two things feel maybe a bit incongruous. But yeah, I think it's remembering who your film is for, and particularly if that is the disabled community, what that then means in terms of distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Before we end, we have a couple of questions from the audience. I just want to make sure that we get time to ask them. I think what's probably best with these, since we've only got about 8 minutes left, is that I just ask them, and then if you want to respond to them, then go ahead. So the first one is from Connor, and it's, what resources are available or that you would recommend for those with smaller budgets, either in production or exhibition, to make the practice as accessible as possible?
So it's about accessibility on a budget, this question, I think.
That's correct. Yeah. So what resources would you suggest for people who are working on a smaller budget to help with accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult, isn't it, sometimes, because, you know, BSL interpreters cost money because they do a fantastic job. And you know, so to make something fully accessible is difficult because, of course, there is a diversity of disability as well, you know, and a whole range of accessibility features, you know, that screen content needs to be truly accessible. And so it's one of those kind of how long is a piece of string questions. But I think there are ways of, we've been, I like to think, quite ingenious about this sort of thing at 104 Films, you know, where we will try and do stuff on a budget if we can. And there are, you know, my last film, Verisimilitude, the film that was on earlier, I did the audio description myself, you know, and so you don't have to pay an actor, you don't have to get a script done, you don't have to pay somebody like one of the big audio description companies. You can do captioning with software, you know, with AI now. It's really, it's not perfect, obviously, but it's pretty good. So there are ways you can make work accessible, I think, on a budget. And yeah, it comes down to time again. You know, time is an accessibility factor, you know, and if you've got the time to do it yourself, brilliant, and the resources. I mean, I'm a complete Luddite, have no technical knowledge, but still manage to make stuff accessible. Where there's a will, there's a way, I'd say, you know, and it's just creative thinking. We're all creatives, we make films, you know, and it's being creative with your accessibility as well.
And I think also, obviously, it might not be, if it's a budget from a funder, I think it's lobbying and pressuring them to actually give you an access budget, because they should do. If it's something that's like self-funded and that's why it's harder, then I do feel like intention goes a long way, that like, and maybe it is just being honest and being like, look, we might not be able to get everything, we might not be able to do this perfectly, but we do have the intention to do it as best as possible. And could you, because I think that can actually go a long way for at least making people be able to make an informed decision about whether it's going to be accessible enough for them, and at least show that you care, rather than just sort of pretending like if you just sort of don't do it, then it will just go away.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then the other question that we have is from Joanne. It's quite a good one to sort of move towards the end of our conversation, which is, these conversations are so important, but do you ever look forward to a future where these discussions become redundant or less needed?
I think not really. I mean, yes, in theory, I want that to be the future. It is sad in a sense that we have to have these conversations. I always say, like, my documentary, really all I wanted to do with it is to humanize disabled people, which, like, it just shouldn't be rocket science that we are human and should be treated like humans. So in a sense it's sad, but also it's really fun to feel like you're making work and having conversations that have the power to, like, you know, change things, change the world. So I try to enjoy the process and hope that one day things are different. But on a personal level, whatever, I'm enjoying the process.
Yeah, and I think debate's really important, isn't it? You know, and actually, you know, we're talking about disability cinema in a certain way at the moment, but what is the next thing? You know, what's the next exciting idea and exciting concept that that somebody will come up with? You know, I really look forward to that. And I think we only get there through debate and discussions. You know, and certainly the discussions we're having now are very different to the discussions we were having 20 years ago. You know, where it's like revolutionary to have a deaf guy in 4 weddings and a funeral, you know, 30 years ago, that is, isn't it? You know, and that was seen as incredible feat of representation for some reason, you know, and now, you know, it's commonplace. So what are we going to be doing in, you know, 25, 30 years time? It's exciting, you know.
Yeah, I feel like, I think what I am maybe looking for, it would be, I feel like we've kind of done it tonight though, but like it would be nice, I think, to get to a place where, because I think sometimes what I worry about is that people think that access is like, you know, they just think of things like making, like, very important things like having a ramp, da 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 da. But also it's like, it's so much more than that. And that is just the absolute, should be just the bare minimum, like, of just making sure that places are physically accessible, and that actually there's, I don't know, like a whole world of kind of access that can be explored that is really exciting and radical and like extends itself into changing the world in a big way. And I think it would be good to talk about it in, yeah, like in those terms, I think, and about how it intersects with all different kind of marginalized communities. Yeah, which I think is getting, like, I do feel like that's happening, but not fast enough, I think.
Just to echo what everyone said, I think it's kind of two things. Like Ella was saying, like, for yourself, you kind of just want to get on with it. You want to just to get on with the work. But I think as the industry and our society becomes more inclusive and more diverse, and we kind of, you know, film and cinema and TV kind of celebrate, you know, the human condition in all its forms, these discussions will be less niche and it will be more kind of mainstream. You know, that audiences and filmmakers from all walks of life can have these discussions in the bigger arenas. You know, it's like there will always be, you know, pockets of people, you know, on the fringes. But I think hopefully if what everyone is saying and committed to happens, I think it will be more commonplace and less exciting.
It is, isn't it? I mean, I think we're not too far away really from having, you know, a best director who is disabled standing at the Kodak Theatre, you know, at the Oscars, picking up a you know, a shiny little man. I think it's really not far off. Hopefully, it's one of you guys. But I think that's totally, you know, the next step. Really, you know, that's becoming the mainstream. He wants to be mainstream. I'm happy where we are.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, that felt like an excellent place to sort of end this. Of course, we could all talk for many hours, but thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everyone watching for coming along as well. Keep these conversations going. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lillian. Thanks, everyone.